Promise you won't fall for me." She said it in a stairwell at 9:10 at night, with a box of her books in her arms and two more on the landing behind her, and she said it quietly enough that I nearly asked her to repeat it. I did not ask her to repeat it. I heard it perfectly well the first time. "Josie." "I'm serious, Cal." She shifted the box against her hip. "I need you to actually say it, not laugh at it. I've been rehearsing it in the van for 40 minutes, and if you make a joke, I'm going to put these books back. I'm Cal Nash, 33, and I've been head chef at a 40-cover place on Lowell Street for 6 years, which means I have made approximately 11,000 decisions under pressure, and had exactly none of them prepare me for a woman I'd known for 7 years asking me to promise something in a stairwell. I promise." She let out a breath. "Thank you. Can I get one of those boxes now, or is there more?" "There's more, but have a box." I want to be honest about what I was thinking as I carried that box up the last flight, which is that I had lied. Not a strategic lie, a reflex, the kind you produce when somebody asks you a question you have not been given time to answer honestly. I'd fallen for Josie Ames somewhere around year 3. And by the night she moved in, I'd had 4 years of practice at not doing anything about it, and I was, at that point, extremely good at it. We'd met over a complaint, which she still finds funnier than I do. She'd been at the restaurant with her sister. The kitchen had sent out a fish that was 3 minutes past where it should have been, and she'd asked to speak to whoever cooked it, not to shout, but because she wanted to know whether it was the fish or the pan. I came out expecting the scene and got a woman asking a technically correct question about heat transfer. We talked for 11 minutes at that table with her sister, looking at both of us like we'd started speaking Dutch. She came back the following month on her own. That was 7 years ago, and I have never once got the fish wrong since. Here's how she ended up in my spare room. Josie had been with Grady for 6 years. It ended in February. Not violently, not with a betrayal, just with the slow discovery that she'd built a life around a man who was never going to want the same things, and who had let her believe otherwise because it was easier than the conversation. I want to be fair about Grady, because Josie is, and it took her a long time. I wasn't cruel. He was a man who said, "not yet," for 6 years, about every single thing she wanted. The house, the move, the question she stopped asking at about year 4. And who genuinely believed each individual "not yet" was reasonable, and who never once sat down and added them up. She added them up in February. It took her about an hour on a train with a notebook, which is the most Josie method available. 6 years of "not yet," she said when she told me. And the thing is, every single one of them had a reason. That's what took me so long. There was never a day where he did something indefensible. There were 2,000 days where he did nothing at all. She moved out of their place with about 9 days' notice. She had a deposit tied up and a lease she couldn't sign until June, and I had a spare room I'd been using to store a bicycle I don't ride. 3 months, she said, the first time we discussed it. 4 at the outside. Take as long as you want. 3 months, Cal. If I say 3 months and stay 8, I'm the person my mother is. Then, in the stairwell, 9 days later, she made me promise. Here's what you need to know about the promise, because it wasn't about me. Josie had a best friend at university called Bram. 8 years, the two of them. The sort of friendship where you become part of each other's family, where his mother sent her a card every birthday. And in their final year, at somebody's flat at 3 in the morning, Bram told her he'd been in love with her since 2nd year. She didn't feel the same. She said so as kindly as it's possible to say it, and that was the end of it. Not immediately, and it took about 5 months to properly die. But he couldn't be in a room with her without the sentence in it, and she couldn't say anything to him without wondering how it landed, and one of them stopped texting first, and to this day, she doesn't know which. I lost him, she told me, about a week after she moved in, on my sofa, at an hour when people tell the truth. That's the thing I want you to understand. It wasn't a falling out. Nobody did anything wrong. He was honest, and I was honest, and the honesty ended it, and I have not had a friendship like that since, and I'm 31. What happened to him? He's a pediatrician in Leeds, married, 2 kids. I see it all on Facebook like a stalker once a year. She turned the glass in her hands. His mother still sends the card, Cal. 9 years, every March. She has never once mentioned that her son and I don't speak, and I have never once had the nerve to say anything except thank you. That's a lot to have carried. I've carried it for 9 years, and I've watched it happen to other people twice since. She had her feet under her on my sofa, which is how she sits. So when I say promise you won't fall for me, Cal, I'm not being vain. I'm asking you not to make me choose between having you and being honest, because I've made that choice before and I lost. I said something reassuring. I don't remember what. What I remember is understanding, with total clarity, that I had 4 years of feeling in me, and that there was now precisely one acceptable thing to do with it, which was nothing, forever. The first 4 months were the best 4 months of my life. I want to be clear about that, because the story only works if you know what was actually at stake. We cooked. That was the whole architecture of it. I work nights, she works days, and the overlap was Sunday, and the 2 hours between her finishing and me leaving. So we cooked, badly at first because she couldn't, and then less badly. I want to be accurate about how badly. She had, at 31, a working repertoire of 4 things, one of which was toast. 6 years with Grady, and in 6 years the division of labor had settled into her doing everything administrative and him doing all the cooking, which sounds equitable until you work out that it left her, at the end of it, unable to feed herself properly in her own life. He liked doing it, she said, the first time it came up. I like doing it too. That's not the same as you not knowing how. I know how to make 4 things. Then we'll do 5. We did 5 in about a fortnight. By August, she could do a proper ragu unsupervised and had opinions about salt that she'd got entirely from me and was now presenting back to me as her own, which I allowed to happen because it was funnier. Sundays became the fixed point. I don't work Sunday nights. She doesn't start until 11 on Mondays, so Sunday evening we cooked something that took time, something with a braise in it, something you had to stand near, and ate at about 9, and then didn't do very much until midnight. 38 Sundays. I counted them afterward, which tells you everything you need to know about me. The first night was a bolognese, and she got sauce on herself within about 90 seconds. Have you got an apron? I did. I had a stack of them, and I gave her the oldest one, a canvas one from my first kitchen in Bristol, faded to almost nothing, with a scorch mark on the left hip from an incident in 2014 I still don't discuss. This is disgusting. That's a professional garment. Cal, there's a burn on it. There's a story on it. I went back to the onions. Wear it or don't. She wore it. She wore it every single time after that for 11 months, without either of us ever remarking on the fact that a woman who had been in the flat 4 days had acquired a permanent apron. I want to be precise about why I gave her that one, and not a clean one, because I have had a long time to think about it, and the honest answer is not flattering. I have 4 aprons. 2 are new. 1 is from the place I'm at now, and 1 is from a kitchen in Bristol where I was 24 and got shouted at for 11 hours a day and learned everything I know. I gave her the only object in that flat that meant anything to me, on night 1. Disguised as a joke about a burn mark. That is the entire 11 months in one gesture, and neither of us noticed at the time. She edited. That's her job. She's a copy editor at a publisher 2 towns over, and she works at my kitchen table with a red pen. Because she says screens make her miss things. And I'd come in at midnight, and she'd still be at it under 1 lamp, and I'd cook her something because she hadn't eaten. And we'd sit there at 12:30 eating properly at a table like 2 adults, and I was happier in that 11 months than I have been at any point before or since. I want to give you 1 evening from it, because 11 months of contentment is impossible to describe, and 1 Tuesday isn't. June. She'd been on the same manuscript for 9 days, a memoir by a man she described as sincere and completely without a second draft in him. And I came in at 12:10 and she had her head on the table. Is it dead? It's not dead. It's worse. It's nearly good. She didn't lift her head. There's a real book in here, and he's written around it for 300 pages, and I can't say that, because I'm the copy editor. My job is commas. Say it anyway. It's not my job, Cal. You've been on it 9 days, you've stopped eating, and you're lying on my table at midnight. I put a pan on. That's not a comma problem. Write him a note. She lifted her head and looked at me. That's the most sensible thing anybody has said to me all week, and I resent it enormously. She wrote the note. 4 pages. She sent it at 2 in the morning with a covering email apologizing for overstepping, and the man rang her publisher a week later and asked whether she'd do a full structural edit, and it became the first book she ever got a proper credit on. She told me about this call standing in that kitchen, wearing my apron, with the phone still in her hand, and her whole face changed. And I stood there with a pan in my hand, feeling something so far outside the terms of our arrangement that I had to go and check the oven that wasn't on. I kept the promise. I want that on the record, because it matters later. I never said anything. I never engineered anything. I didn't linger. I didn't do the thing men do where they make themselves indispensable and then present the bill. When she was upset about Grady, I listened, and I did not once say a single word against him, which took a level of restraint I'd like acknowledged. She asked me twice. The first time was July on the sofa, about 11 at night, and it came out sideways. Does it bother you? Having me here? And I said no, obviously not, and she said, that's not what I asked. And I pretended it was, and she let it go. The second time was September, and it wasn't sideways at all. We were washing up. She had her hands in the water and she said, to the window, Cal, can I ask you something, and will you answer it straight? Depends what it is. That's not straight. That's a negotiation. She didn't turn round. Are you all right with the arrangement? Because I made you promise something in a stairwell in March, and I've been in your flat for 6 months, and I've never once checked whether that was fair. And I laughed. I want to describe that laugh properly, because it was the single worst thing I did in 11 months, and it lasted about 1.5 seconds. It was the laugh of a man closing a door. It said, what an absurd question. And it said it warmly. And it was designed, I chose it, to make it impossible for her to ask again. She dried her hands and said, okay, and we talked about something else. 3 months became 5. 5 became 8. The June lease came and went, and she said nothing about it, and neither did I. In October, Grady came back. He texted her on a Tuesday. I know because she showed me, immediately, at the kitchen table, in a way that I understood even then was significant. She didn't sit on it for a day. She put the phone in front of me and said, well, and put her face in her hands. I've been in therapy since March. I've got a lot I should have said and didn't. Can I buy you a coffee? No agenda. Gee. No agenda, she said through her hands. There's an agenda. There's an agenda. He's been in therapy since March. That's 8 months. She looked up. That's a real amount of therapy, Cal. That's not a text somebody sends on a whim. And here is where I made the mistake, and I want to describe it exactly, because for about 6 weeks I thought it was the finest thing I'd ever done. I helped. I told her she should go. I said that 8 months of work deserved a hearing. I said that if she didn't go, she'd wonder, and wondering is worse than knowing, and I said all of it in a level and generous voice, while a specific part of my chest did something I chose not to examine. She went for the coffee. Then a dinner, then a Saturday. And every single time she came back and sat at my table and processed it out loud, I helped her process it. I asked good questions. I steel-manned the man. Once, and I think about this more than anything else in this story, she said, I don't know, I think part of me is looking for a reason to say no. And I said, don't do that, don't build a case. If it's no, it'll be no on its own. I was so proud of that sentence. I remember being proud of it. There were 6 weeks of this. 6 weeks of a woman I'd been in love with for 4 years, sitting at my kitchen table at midnight, working out whether to go back to somebody else, while I made her food and asked balanced questions. The worst night was the third Saturday. She came back at 11 and sat down and said, "He asked what I'd need to try again. He asked me to actually list it." That's a good question for him to ask. It is. She had the apron over the chair back and she was looking at it rather than me. So I listed, and halfway through the list I realized I was describing a Tuesday in this flat. I said nothing at all. I have replayed that silence probably 400 times. "Cal? Sorry, long service." I got up and put the kettle on with my back to her. What did he say? And she let me get away with it. She let me stand at that counter with my back to her and change the subject, and she said something about Grady's response. And we moved on, and I wanted understood that she gave me an open door that night, and I closed it politely from the inside. It took my brother about 4 minutes to take it apart, in November, in a pub, having listened to the whole thing with an expression of growing disbelief. "Let me get this right." He put his glass down. "You've been in love with her for 4 years. She's asked you to promise not to be. Her ex, who wasted 6 years of her life, has come back, and your response has been to coach her through it." "I promised her." "You promised you wouldn't fall for her. You did that in year 3, mate. The promise was already impossible when you made it." He was genuinely angry, which he almost never is. "You didn't promise to help him. That's a thing you've added." "I'm respecting her." "You're hiding." He said it flatly. "You've found the one behavior that looks exactly like honor and costs you nothing, because as long as you're the man who helped, you never have to be the man who asked. And if she goes back to Grady, you get to be sad about it for 10 years and never once have to hear her say no." I did not have anything to say to that. "Cal, does she know?" "No." "Does she know?" "She's asked me twice, in 8 months. Both times I laughed." He sat back. "Then you've broken the promise and lied about it, and you've been congratulating yourself for the lie, which is worse than just telling her, because at least telling her is honest and gives her something to work with." I went home that night and did not sleep. Here's what I want to say about the 2 weeks that followed, because it's the part I'm least proud of and it doesn't reflect well. I got cold, not deliberately. But once I'd seen what I was doing, I couldn't keep doing it, and I didn't know how to do anything else, so I did less. I stopped waiting up. I stopped cooking at midnight. I took 2 extra shifts I didn't need, and I was polite and pleasant and about 40% present. Josie noticed on day 3 and said nothing until day 11. On day 11, she was at the table with the red pen, and she put it down. "Are you going to tell me what's happened, or are we doing this until I move out?" "Nothing's happened." "Cal." She said it the way you say a name when you're using it as a whole sentence. "You've been in running a service in this flat for 11 months, and now you're a very courteous stranger, and I have been sitting here every night working out what I did." "You haven't done anything." "Then what?" I looked at her across the table with the apron over the back of her chair and the red pen in her hand and 11 months of the best thing in my life sitting in the room with us. And I broke the promise. "I lied to you in the stairwell." She went very still. "I'd already fallen for you," I said. 4 years, since about 18 months after we met. You asked me for something in a stairwell that I couldn't give you, and I said yes because I wanted you in the flat, and I have spent 11 months keeping the letter of it, and I'm not going to do that anymore because it's turned me into something I don't like." Josie did not say anything for a long time. "Say the rest of it," she said finally. "There isn't a rest." "There's a rest, Cal. You've got the face." She hadn't moved. "You've been building that for 4 years. There's a rest." So I said the rest. "I've spent 4 years watching you be with somebody who was never going to choose you, and I never said one word against him. Not once, because I decided that would be self-interested." My hands were flat on the table. "And I've spent 6 weeks helping you consider going back to him. I made you dinner and asked balanced questions about a man who gave you 2,000 days of nothing. And I told myself that was love, that it was the most generous thing available to me. It wasn't. It was cowardice with a tea towel over it. That's why you've gone cold." "I've gone cold because my brother said it out loud in a pub, and I couldn't unhear it." I made myself finish. "Being the one who helps is the only position where I never have to hear you say no. That's what I've been doing. For 4 years and then for 6 weeks in a concentrated dose. Cal, I'm not finished, and I've got about 4 sentences left in me. I put my hands flat on the table. I'm not asking you for anything. You've told me what this costs you, and I believe you, and I would not put you through it. But I'm not going to lie in my own kitchen anymore, and I'm not going to sit here and be helpful about Grady, because I can't do it without becoming somebody I've got no respect for. She had her hand over her mouth. You should say something, I said. Anything's fine. I've had 4 years to build up to that, and you've had about 90 seconds. I need to go for a walk. Okay. She was gone for 2 hours. I did the washing up twice. When she came back, she stood in the doorway of the kitchen with her coat still on and said, I'm going to tell you 3 things, and I need to get through all of them. Okay? 1. I told Grady no. On Sunday. Before any of this, Sunday afternoon, at his flat, and I haven't told you because I've been working out how to say it in a way that didn't sound like it was about you. She took a breath. It wasn't about you. He's done a lot of work and he's a better man than he was, and it's still no, because I spent 6 years being somebody's someday, and I've discovered I've got no appetite left for it. Josie. 2. She held up a hand. The promise was mine. I made you make it. And I have spent 9 years telling myself that what happened with Bram was about honesty being dangerous, and it wasn't. Her voice went. It was about me being 22 and not knowing how to hold something difficult, so I let it starve. That's what happened. He was honest, and I didn't have the equipment, and I've built a whole doctrine out of my own failure and made you sign it. I did not move. 3. She was crying now and entirely furious about it. You are the only person who has ever cooked for me at midnight because I'd forgotten to eat. 11 months. Every single time. And I have known since about June, and I said nothing because I'd made you promise. And if I'd said anything first, I'd have been the person who set the rule and then broke it. And I couldn't. June. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. The night about the manuscript. You told me to write the note, and I sent it at 2 in the morning, and I lay there afterward and thought, he's the only person who's ever told me to take up more room. Her jaw went. Grady used to say I was intense. 6 years. And you looked at me lying on your table at midnight and told me to write 4 more pages. That's not. Don't tell me what it is. I've had 5 months with it. She was still in the doorway with her coat on. And every night since June, I've sat at that table in your apron, editing somebody else's sentences while you cooked, and I've thought, I made him promise. He's keeping it. I'm the only one here who's allowed to speak, and I've made it impossible for myself. You could have. So could you, Cal? That's the entire point. 2 people in a flat for 11 months, both of us mute, because of 11 words I said in a stairwell in March. She let out something that was half a laugh and mostly not. I've read 400 manuscripts, and I've never once seen a plot this stupid get past an editor. I got up. Cal, I'm not finished. You're finished. She was, as it turned out, finished. I want to be honest that we both cried, that neither of us was elegant about it, and that at some point the red pen went off the table and rolled under the fridge and stayed there until we moved out 14 months later. We took it slowly afterward, which is a strange thing to say about 2 people who had already lived together for 11 months and knew each other's entire families. The strangeness was the point, actually. We had to work out which parts had been friendship and which parts had been us being careful, and it turned out a lot of the careful had to go. She stayed in the spare room for 6 more weeks, her decision, and correct. I'm not moving down the hall on a Tuesday because we had a good night, she said. I want to have chosen it in daylight, with the least sorted, like a person. I told her that was the least romantic sentence ever produced in that flat, and she told me to grow up. Those 6 weeks were strange and good. We were, for the first time in 11 months, allowed to be obvious, which turned out to require learning, because 11 months of carefulness leaves marks. I caught myself twice in the first fortnight not touching her arm in the kitchen, out of pure habit, and had to stand there and consciously undo it. She had it worse, I think. There was a night in the second week where she stopped mid-sentence at the table and said, I keep waiting for you to go quiet on me. I'm not going to. I know. I'm telling you what my body's doing, not what I think. She picked the pen back up. 9 years I've had a rule about this, Cal. It doesn't come off in a fortnight. We also, at her insistence, had one conversation I'd have avoided for a decade. I want to say the Bram thing properly, she said, about a month in, because I got it wrong out loud in front of you and I want to correct it on the record. You don't have to. I do, because you've been living inside my wrong version since March. She sat down. What happened with Bram isn't that honesty is dangerous. What happened is that a 22-year-old told me the truth, and I panicked and let the whole thing die rather than sit in something uncomfortable for 6 months. He didn't cost me that friendship. My discomfort did. That's a hard thing to say about yourself. It's a hard thing to have worked out at 31 while wearing a borrowed apron. She almost smiled. I wrote to his mother, by the way, last week. 9 years of birthday cards, and I finally said thank you properly. What did she say? She said she'd always hoped one of us would write, and that Bram is happy, and that she'd tell him I'd been in touch. Josie shrugged, and her eyes were wet. That's it. That's all it took. 9 years and 1 letter. She got the lease sorted. Then she chose it in daylight, like a person, and moved down the hall in January. And we lived in that flat for another year and moved to a bigger one in the spring after. Grady sent a card when we got engaged. It said, in full, genuinely pleased for you both. He was always going to be the one. I think I knew that in about 2019 G. Josie read it twice, said, and put it in the drawer, and we have never discussed it again. I proposed at the kitchen table at midnight, with a plate of food in front of her, because she'd forgotten to eat. You've made me carbonara. I've made you carbonara. Cal, it's 12:30 and I've got a manuscript. Josie. I sat down opposite her. 11 months, I made you food at this hour, and neither of us said what it was. I'd like to keep doing it, and I'd like it to have a name. She put the fork down. You're doing this at the table. I'm doing this at the table, with carbonara. It's what we've got. She looked at the plate for a long moment and then back at me and said, ask me properly, because I'm going to tell this story for 40 years and I need the wording. So I asked her properly, and she said yes, and then she said, right, and picked the fork back up and ate the entire plate before she'd let me get up, on the grounds that it would be a waste, and she'd not eaten since 11. We married in the September after that. Small. Her mother cried. My brother gave a toast that included the pub conversation almost verbatim and got a much bigger laugh than I was comfortable with. Her sister, the one who'd sat at the table 7 years earlier watching 2 people argue about a fish, did a reading and then said one thing off script at the end. I was there when they met, she said. I want everyone to know it took them 7 years, 1 bad piece of fish, a promise, and a man in therapy in another county. And that they are both, professionally, people who are paid to notice things. The apron is in a frame now. That sounds absurd, and I want to defend it. It's a canvas apron from a Bristol kitchen with a scorch mark on the left hip and 11 months of a woman's bolognese on the front, and my sister-in-law had it mounted for our first anniversary because Josie told her the story at a Christmas. It hangs in the hall. People assume it's a chef thing. Occasionally somebody asks and Josie answers, and her version is always the same and always shorter than mine. He gave me the worst apron he owned on the first night, she says, and I wore it for 11 months, and neither of us ever mentioned that I'd taken it. Which is not the whole story. The whole story is that she asked me for a promise in a stairwell, and I gave her one I'd already broken, and it took 11 months, 1 text from a man in therapy, and my brother's absolute contempt to make me admit it out loud. And she'd known since June. There's a thing I think about, and I'll finish on it. When she asked me in the stairwell, I could have said the true thing. 90 seconds, in March, before a single box was up the stairs. I can't promise that because it's already happened, and if that means you'd rather not move in, then I'd understand. She might have gone. That's the honest version. She was raw and frightened and 9 years into a doctrine about Bram, and there is a real chance she'd have put the box down and found somewhere else. But she'd have known, and I'd have known. And whatever came next, neither of us would have spent 11 months mute at a kitchen table pretending to be people who were fine. I got the 11 months. I don't regret them, exactly. 38 Sundays is 38 Sundays, and I wouldn't hand them back. But we could have had 13 years by now instead of 9, and we lost 4 of them to a sentence I said in a stairwell because I was frightened, and she lost 9 to a sentence she'd been telling herself since she was 22. 2 people who are paid to notice things. Have you ever kept a promise so carefully that you turned into somebody you didn't recognize? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.